Collagen is the most abundant protein in your body and is essentially the glue that holds you together. In fact, after age 20, people produce 12% less collagen in their skin each decade. Collagen depletion is what makes you look old. Most collagen supplements do not provide the hydrolyzed bioactive collagen peptides that enable your body to digest collagen properly, plus it tastes badly. BioTrust gives you the 5 most available kinds of collagens that dissolve easily in hot or cold liquids with 0 taste. You can add it to your coffee, tea, or smoothies, or even baked goods recipes. So to look and feel younger fast, go to www.healthwithbill.com. Good evening. I'm still reporting on the coup. Here it comes, a full-on Stalinist purge of Biden's opposition, that is, us God-fearing, individual, freedom-loving Americans, and I'd put about 75% of the American population, black, white, brown, and yellow, in that illustrious category. We just can't let this sneak up on us. Americans have such a long tradition of the rule of law and rooting out evil that it's hard for most of us to believe that total evil has not just taken root in government, but is now controlling most of the levers of power. Former CIA Director Mike Pompeo keeps banging his drum with this simple message. The Chi-Coms are now inside the gates, and they are doing severe damage to what makes America a free nation. Putin, for the time being, is getting what he can out of Biden, and that means lots more than his precious gas pipeline into Europe. But the price Putin is paying is doing the bidding of Biden by being as obnoxious on the world stage as possible. Why? Number 1, so Biden can play the tough guy, and number 2, so that Biden's real ally, China, won't be getting any negative attention from the MSM for their devastating experiment in bioweapons. So yep, for the foreseeable future, we are back to Russia, 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 once again, while China pursues their very effective low-intensity warfare completely under the radar. But the domestic crackdown on conservatives is about to hit new heights, being justified by a new DOJ report that tries to pin most of the nation's terrorism on conservatives.
To great fanfare from a grateful media, Attorney General Merrick Garland issued a 32-page report called the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. Now, it's filled with a lot of bureaucratic jargon, but the strategy is just a thinly veiled effort to demonize the Democrats' political opponents and frighten voters before the next election. Now, in order to keep us safe from people like Chief Furball and his friends who were posing for selfies at the Capitol, Biden's forces will team up with the same crew who helped them win in 2020. Of course, I'm talking about Mark Zuckerberg and the big tech censors. Expect to see armies of fact-checkers and fewer independent sources of information that question the status quo.
The technology sector is particularly important to countering terrorist abuse of internet-based communication platforms, to recruit, incite, plot attacks, and foment hatred. Relevant stakeholders, including tech companies, NGOs, and academics, to tackle the online aspects of this threat.
NGOs, that means non-governmental organizations. In other words, George Soros money, the Bill Gates Foundation, and the Zuckerbergs.
And of course, no effort to turn American against American would be complete without snitching incentives among our members of the armed forces.
The Department of Defense will train service members on the potential targeting of current and former military members by violent extremists in order to help prevent radicalization.
Of course, this report totally ignores the massive damage done to American cities last summer by left-wing groups.
Now it's starting to come out that even the FBI may have been involved in stirring up as much mayhem as possible for the home of the free and the land of the brave. Laura Ingraham had on the former Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division last night, who revealed the truth as opposed to this one-sided DOJ report.
We're watching right now, Laura, as the President, the Attorney General, the Democratic Party, this administration, are weaponizing the machinery of government to silence dissent. I never thought I would see that in the United States of America, but that's what's going on. How can we be so sure? Well, after a few months, about 100 days, I think they mentioned, of this massive study in which they're able to say all the things they just did about where the problem is. And of course, the problem goes to the white supremacists that we really can't find that many of, and to religious people who believe in certain principles that we've always believed in. Those are the problem people. And yet they failed to answer the two big questions. They were unable to say, here's what we need. We need a material support type of violation to deal with domestic terrorism, similar to what we have when we're dealing with international terrorism, providing material support to terrorists. And so we need that for domestic organizations. And what about classifying some domestic organizations as domestic terror organizations? They left that alone. Now, why did they leave that alone? Why did they not really talk about that much except to say that? Because if they sat down and they did guidelines, they would have to turn around and start looking at BLM and Antifa and a dozen other groups as domestic terrorist organizations. They haven't figured out yet how we can slice this up and do one without doing the other. And they're not quite ready politically to do that. But all this is about is political. It is not about terrorism or the best way to work terrorism. Why?
They're doing to law enforcement, federal law enforcement, what public health Fauci has done to the medical field in government. It's the same politicization that it devastates their credibility. It's terrible for the country. Forget about the Democrats and the Republicans. It is terrible for the country. Now, I have to play something to you. This is the DHS Secretary, Mr. Mayorkas, who is speaking about these disturbing comments about Garland, specifically monitoring internet communications. Watch.
We are working with the social media companies to be able to better identify the false narratives, to be able to identify disinformation and misinformation, and really educate the American public.
Good Lord, does this guy look like someone who would fit right in with the MOS secret society crowd?
Terry, who gets to decide what which narrative is false, and what fact patterns or what objective metrics are they actually using?
They're not using any objective metrics. Now we have had it confirmed that our own government is going to join forces with the very people in the very industry that has been censoring and prohibiting free speech for the last 2 years. That's what's getting ready to happen. We now have our own version of Baghdad Bob and the Wizard of Oz in the form of Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. It's really a shame. It's alarming. It's sad. And one of the saddest factors here is that no longer are our government institutions, like the FBI, for example, any longer able to stand up to what all of this really is. When you start talking like they've been talking today about disinformation, misinformation, your point of who is going to make these determinations, when they start talking about what the threats are and using terms like white supremacy, we're going right back to those very days. You and I have talked about this before. All of this is what they do in communist societies. Yep. This is how they brainwash people. These are the first steps. We are watching this now happen here.
To reiterate for those who didn't catch that last sentence, this is how they brainwash people in communist societies, i.e. the Chi-Coms. At this point, Putin is just playing his part in order to help his nation survive the coming onslaught until or unless he has someone he can ally up with other than China Joe. I'm still reporting from just outside the citadel of world freedom. Good day. Gold and silver have stood the test of time. They give stability in times like these. Start an IRA this month with Noble Gold and you'll get a 1/10 ounce gold bullion American Eagle coin. You'll be growing thousands of extra tax-deferred dollars in your fund over the years safely and steadily. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com.